neighborhood. So when we're planning, we have to make sure that we have housing that they can afford, because you know, to make the village successful, you need those people as well. You know, they need to be able to, they cannot commute to Tracy. Again, gas is only going to get more and more expensive, and they need to be able to live within our community. So that's one of the challenges we have, is to provide housing for all income ranges. I think it's good. So,
Yan-Han?
How can I add to this? Maybe I would not focus necessarily on Santa Clara, but I would kind of toss it out there as kind of a challenge to most of you. And you kind of live with it. I mean, you know, you're business people, you're different professions, and you've seen the changes in the economy. You've seen the changes in demographics. When you look at Cupertino and you go back 15 years ago, maybe even a little bit further, you know, 20 years ago, they didn't have that sense of identity. And you kind of say, you know, is that sense of identity going to hold up in this kind of Bay Area economy, this Bay Area demographics? You know, is there going to be a shift that says Cupertino is not going to hold that sense of place as a premier just for education? There are other education centers, other opportunities. Maybe people realize that it is not focused just on the public school. I always kind of joke around with a number of educators and say, in Santa Clara, it's still the same demographics, but the students are sent to private schools so that the numbers are not necessarily tracked properly. If you actually, you have people going to Bellarmine and St. Justin's, St. Joseph's, and everywhere else, and you kind of say, pull all those students that actually live in Santa Clara and compile their test scores, where they'd be competitive, comparatively to the other areas. So that's kind of just put out there. With regards to the comment about me, where do people get a sense that Cupertino is kind of a premier place for education? I would say that the print media and even TV really drives it now. Many of the ethnic groups really rely on the telephone books that are basically placed in front of the supermarkets and shopping centers. And if you ever look inside it, what do they have? They basically have in the free info sections the rating of the high schools in the Bay Area. And that is not just, I mean, we look at it, many of us look at the Chinese telephone book, but if you ever picked up a book that's in Korean, or picked up one in Japanese, picked one up in Indian, they all have the same thing. They all rank and basically identify the sense of place for their community. And so, for Fremont, I also kind of put out the challenges that they have. When I grew up in Fremont, I would walk the commercial shopping center and stuff, and me and my brother and maybe one of my cousins would be the only minority in the whole store. So you'd be walking through a JCPenney's or something like a Montgomery Ward's, and here's a store of maybe around 6,000 or 7,000 people in the shopping center, and we would be the only minorities. So that gives you kind of a sense of where Fremont has come. But where's Fremont going to go? It's the same thing in Santa Clara. There's a sense that there's a Korean population that actually exists in Santa Clara, or is it just the Korean businesses are in Santa Clara, not necessarily, where do they reside? They reside, I asked many of them, and I said, where do you reside? They reside in Cupertino, they reside in Saratoga.
Well, I kind of wanted to add to that a little bit for Fremont, since you threw it out to Fremont. I guess as an attorney, I would advise each of you, as you have clients, to never make any representations to your clients as to which schools or which attendance areas they're going to be going into. Because there's been such a push towards the Mission San Jose High School, which is historically ranked one of the top in the state, if not the country, we've had a tremendous crush of Asian Americans coming into that area, wanting to have their children go to the mission schools. To the point now that our school district has adopted a policy that there is no longer going to be a neighborhood guarantee that there will be voting available to schools in other attendance areas. And this is also, we have everyone here, I think, our city staff, except for me as an appointed planning commissioner, but then you have the tension between the school districts and the city government. I don't think any of the jurisdictions here are charged cities where they just control the school districts. so that you have different agencies making different policy determinations, and they run at cross purposes at times. So that argues for better communication between our educational community and our city governmental agencies. But I also should say that we had about 10 years ago there was a policy determination that the area which is known as the Wybell area was moved into a different high school attendance area. And what has happened? They would feed into Irvington High School. The test scores have increased every year at Irvington High. So I would say, I think you can be educators to your clients that may say, well, I only want to go to Cupertino, I only want to go to Mission. The best indicator of a good education are the parents. And I think that we have great teachers everywhere in Fremont. We have great teachers everywhere in San Jose, Santa Clara. My brother is an educator. I come from a family of educators, so I want to stand up for that profession as well. So that we should not get lost in saying it has to be in this neighborhood, it has to be in this particular attendance area, or else my student won't have a good education.
Yeah, I actually just made that point to a client the other day that was looking in for Mission San Jose and talked about Irvington. And I want to thank, since I'm a product of East San Jose elementary education, but did go to Bellevue.
Since you're here for the commercial, let me just make a comment. I mean, Santa Clara is known as the heart of Silicon Valley, and it's high tech. And we have a lot of big companies. Intel is headquartered in Santa Clara, National Semiconductor, Applied Materials, and we have many others. And Marvell and others that are coming in. The key is, for us as city planners, is saying, is there a paradigm shift in the economy? If there really is a paradigm shift, are we really ready? Do we really know where the economy is going to head if our core economy down here in Silicon Valley changes? We have people that are educated. We have people that are skilled and knowledgeable. We have an excellent workforce. But if the world economy changes and this whole thing about information technology moves it a little bit faster and a little bit further, and we're trying to find the gap. And I talk to many people in the industry, and even in Silicon Valley, they kind of acknowledge it. There's this thing about dealing with global warming and being green. And is that going to lead us out of this? There's other areas around the Bay Area that says, we're talking about being the biotech, nanotech. But can you imagine if the economy changes and it says India, China, somewhere in Latin America, somewhere in Europe, basically captures the next hotspot, and our economy then basically flattens out? What happens to all this square footage that is out there? I think the commercial and the schools pretty much can take care of itself, but it's going to be a hard time for us. And so I mentioned all the square footage that Santa Clara has these applications in. Are they really spec, or are they really, companies are really ready to move in and occupy these, entitled square footage? So that's kind of tossed out there for you to think about. And I think we don't have the answers, and that's what I was trying to get to, is we don't have the answers with regards to demographics. We don't have the answers necessarily for where school districts are headed, or individual high schools and test scores. But I do have, final note is a sense of place. If you have a sense of place, people want to basically live and work in a place where they feel they're at home. And that means they have services and they have amenities. And so I kind of put that out there for you to think about.
Thank you. I want to give Connie a chance, and then what I want to do is just have a little bit of time for questions, and we're running out of time very quickly. But Connie?
Just real quick, I just want to add that something that I encounter with working with companies is that I think in Silicon Valley, there's really, for companies, there's no boundaries between, Sunnyvale, Cupertino, Santa Clara. They just want to be in Silicon Valley. And when we talk about that, our demographics are this, we're X percentage of Asian or Chinese. Again, is it really the businesses, or do they live there? And what we're finding is that sometimes a lot of people have their businesses in Sunnyvale but live elsewhere, or they live in Sunnyvale but they work elsewhere. So our dynamics is changing, and I think what's happening is that we're not seeing strict boundaries where, oh, you're living in Sunnyvale, wall goes up, and now you're in Santa Clara. And the same thing with schools. Some areas of Sunnyvale are actually Cupertino schools. So there's really no boundaries. So we really just have to think of us as a region and continue to think of that and continue to work collectively.
So just to add on that a little bit, you might also be